The strike is over, and now here's a preview of the 19. The Indians have a new ownership group led by local entrepreneur Nick Mileti. Mileti was a former law director of the city of Lakewood. He is the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, the American Hockey League Cleveland Barons, and the Cleveland Arena. He is trying to land an expansion NHL team for Cleveland. They're planning on expanding either 2 teams or 4 teams for the 1974-75 season. And Cleveland is a finalist for that expansion, and the NHL plans on announcing at the end of May who the new teams will be. Mileti is also spearheading the building of a modern arena in Richfield, Ohio. The Mileti Group also has local business big shots Howard Metzenbaum and Ted Bonda as members. Mileti ceased negotiations between the Indians organizations and New Orleans regarding the Indians playing part of their home schedule in the Superdome when it opens in 1974. So that deal is over. It's finished before it even started. The custom Topps cards in this presentation are from the custom baseball cards page from Facebook. The main page for the 1972 Cleveland Indians was created by David Jenkins, and Lynn Phelps contributed to the page. The Indians have a new manager, Ken Aspromonte. He spent a couple seasons playing for the Indians, and he was the manager of their top farm club, the Wichita Arrows, for the last 2 seasons. Indians general manager Gabe Paul promised that there would be a lot of players moved around after the disastrous 1971 season, and he made good on that promise. On October 5th, the Indians trade Frank Baker, Alan Foster, and disgruntled veteran Vada Pinson to the Angels. And they received the disgruntled Alex Johnson and Jerry Moses. November 29th, and probably the biggest trade during the offseason, the Indians trade Sam McDowell, another disgruntled veteran, to the Giants. And the Indians receive Gaylord Perry and Frank Duffy in return. December 2nd, the Indians trade Roy Foster, Rich Hand, Mike Paul, and Ken Suarez to the Rangers. Mike Paul was probably the best pitcher that the Indians had last season. He had 2 good months after coming off the disabled list. The Indians received Gary Jones, Terry Lee, Denny Riddleberger, and Del Unser. December 6th, another disgruntled veteran, Ted Uhlaender, is traded to the Reds. Uhlaender threatened to retire rather than continue playing for the Indians. And the Indians acquired young pitcher Milt Wilcox in that trade. On the same day, the Indians purchased Adolfo Phillips from the Expos. On January 17th, this is a typo, that should be 1972, the Indians released utility infielder Chuck Hinton. On March 29th, days before the strike was announced, the Indians purchased Marcino Lopez from the Brewers. On April 3rd, after the strike was called but before the Indians season was scheduled to start, the Indians trade Ted Ford to the Rangers. Cleveland received Tom McCraw, and they re-obtained Roy Foster. And during the strike on April 12th, the Indians purchased Ron Lolich from the White Sox. A pair of spring training invitees who weren't signed, Mike Hirschberger from Northeastern Ohio, and Jim Mudcat Grant, who started his long pitching career with the Indians. Spoiler alert, Mudcat Grant will be part of the Indians organization next season. The Indians coaches, their new coaches, Joe Lutz will be the first base coach, Bobby Hoffman the third base coach, Warren Spahn the pitching coach. Spahn and Aspromonte got acquainted in the American Association when Spahn was managing Tulsa and Aspromonte was managing Wichita. They'll also have Clay Bryant, who will occasionally be a bench coach and mainly be a roving instructor. As far as the Indians' opening day lineup, or roster rather, for their catchers, Ray Fosse will be the number one catcher, backed up by Jerry Moses. Ray Fosse was also the player representative for the Indians during the strike. The Indians' infield will consist of Rookie of the Year Chris Chambliss at first base, Eddie Leon at second. Last season, Eddie Leon bounced back between second and shortstop, and Ken Aspromonte wants him to play second base strictly this year. Newcomer Frank Duffy at shortstop and Greg Nettles at third. Last season, Nettles played in every inning of every game. The Indians' reserve infielders are rookie Jack Brohammer, Fred Stanley, who was called up early last season, played very well. Then he had to spend, he was gone, I think, almost 3 weeks as part of his reserve duty, and he just could not get back on track when he came back to the club. And it'll be rounded up by Luke Camilli. Camilli hit .389 as a pinch hitter last year. So we'll see if that'll be his role this year. Indians' outfield has a new look, with Alex Johnson slated to be the left fielder, Del Unser the center fielder, and rookie Buddy Bell in right field. Buddy Bell was considered to be the top farmhand of the Indians after Chris Chambliss was called up. Buddy Bell was the Rookie of the Year in the American Association last year. In reserve in the outfield, the Indians will have Tom McCraw, Roy Foster, who was reacquired, John Lowenstein, who had a couple of trips up with the Indians last season, and newly acquired Adolfo Phillips. Ken Aspromonte is going with a 3-man rotation for the first couple weeks of the season. And that will be Gaylord Perry, the number one, and then newly acquired young pitcher Milt Wilcox and rookie Dick Tidrow rounding out the starting rotation. In the Indians' bullpen, they'll have Ray Lamb, who I thought had a very disappointing season last year. Newly acquired Denny Riddleberger, Steve McGorry, who pitched well in a limited role last year, and Ed Farmer, who would look great one day and not so great the next day sometimes. Also in the bullpen, they have Vince Colbert, who pitched fairly well last year, and Steve Hargan, who had a great rookie year with the Indians. Then he's had arm trouble ever since. He came back. He went down for a short minor league stint last year. He was unhappy about it, but he came back and he pitched well in the latter half of the season. And they will have Phil Hennigan beginning the season on the disabled list. Here are some faces of the future for the Indians. Included on there is Alvin McGrew, who's getting glowing reports from the Sporting News and Street and Smith, although I don't think he ever appears for the Indians. There's also Eric Raich. He was the number 1 pick in the January draft. Down on the farm, there'll be players like Steve Dunning, the phenom who came from Stanford, their number 1 pick in 1970. Marcelino Lopez, who they just acquired. Local man Larry Doby Johnson. Jack Heidemann, who ended his season last August with knee surgery. Newly acquired Ron Lolich. Jim Moyer, and Terry Lee. And that about does it. That's what the Indians will look like on opening day when they open April 15th against the Milwaukee Brewers.